Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I want to welcome you to Manatee Tiger Bay. Today I'm Xtavia Bailey, your president and moderator. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Right now, I would like to recognize our veterans and any active duty members. Would you please stand so we can thank you so much? Please give our veterans a round of applause. Thank you so much for your service. Right now, we have a few dignitaries and we have representatives of our dignitaries. We have School Board Member District 1, Gina Messenger. Thank you for coming. Please give her a round of applause. We have Cindy Dake, School Board Member District 2. Please give her a round of applause. We have Tara Polton representing Congressman Buchanan's office. Please give her a round of applause. And Carol Kalinda representing Representative Tommy Gregory. Thank you for coming. Hey, Mary Foreman, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. And Mary Foreman, District 4, right? Mary? 3, excuse me. Thank you so much. Would you please silence your cell phones? This is just a reminder. Let me do mine because mine usually goes off too. Thank you so much. Today's topic is the great debate of critical race theory being taught in classroom and a parent's right to choose what their children are learning in the classroom. This topic, it has a lot of divisiveness to it. It's a lot of debate across our country nationally, right? And certain people feel one way and certain people feel another. Why not have a conversation? I think the problem that we're seeing in America today is that we can't agree to disagree. We cannot come together and have conversations that are difficult. My opinion is that if you can have a conversation by yourself with people who agree with you, you should be able to have a conversation with people who don't agree with you. So today we're going to speak to 4 members of our panels that are going to give you different perspectives on the critical race theory. Are you guys ready for this? Our speakers today is Dr. Sharon Jefferson, Reverend James Golden, Esquire, Attorney Reverend James Golden, School Board Member Richard Tatum, and Marcus Davenport. Please give them a round of applause. If you would like to see their bios, they are online, but I really would like to get into the program. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to have an opportunity to ask those questions. So I want to utilize the time the best way we can today. Our first speaker up is going to be Marcus Davenport. Please give him a round of applause as he comes. Thank you.
All right. So I appreciate everybody coming out today. I'm going to try and keep the intros brief, but what we're going to be talking about today is a very serious matter. CRT, it's being pushed all over the country. I just came back from California. I was living in San Francisco for the last decade, and it's out there, and it's definitely in the schoolrooms, and I'm sure we might even hear that it's not being taught in the school classroom and is being left out of the classroom, and I'm sure we'll go over those arguments in a bit. But first, let's talk about what CRT is and what it's not. CRT is not teaching accurate Black history. It is not that. If that was what it was, we wouldn't be here today, right? So what CRT is it's a Marxist and a mixture of Marxism and postmodernism. So this is part of Gramsci's Long March to the Institutions, if you're familiar with that. But what it is just one of many critical theories. So there's critical race theory, critical gender theory. There's a million critical theories. Whenever we're talking about a critical theory, we have to go back to what critical theories are, rather than just talking about critical race theory, because that'll pigeonhole you. We want to talk about what critical theories are, because they all have this exact same goal, right? So if we go back to Kimberly Crenshaw, in her book, Critical Race Theory, Writings That Formed the Movement, she says, this is one of their foundational writings. She said, the term critical race theory was coined to make it clear that our work located itself in the intersections of critical theory and race, racism, and the law. So she specifically said that it is the intersection of critical theory and race and racism in the law. So just to kind of give you an idea, I'm not just making that up, that the critical theory is very important, and you want to know what that is. So when you have people try to hand wave you and tell you, no, we're just going to teach your kids this. It's nothing wrong with it. Just you should take it, bigot. You shouldn't feel bad pushing back on this, because critical theory has a very long history. So critical theory comes out of the Institute of Marxism. That was the original name. It was changed to the Frankfurt School. So they're out of Germany. These are people that were fleeing Hitler. They were communists, but they landed in America, and they weren't happy with what they saw. They saw that everybody was prosperous, and people, if you're a worker or a boss, you were driving a nice car, you had a house. So they were upset that people weren't poor and struggling like the homes that they left. These are delusional people. So what we're dealing with are people that are so ideologically possessed that when they came to America, they were upset that you were living too good of a life back in the 70s and 60s. So you would not be angry enough to fight for a bloody revolution. So if we just look at citing the actual works of the critical race theorists, what their deal was, they wanted to be able to find a way, because what Marx told them to do was to do a constant critique of all that exists. All that means is literally just saying, oh, well, I see a problem. There's more blacks than there are Asians in the NBA. There must be racism. It's a very silly argument. It's what we call the God of the gaps argument. When you don't know what the problem is, so you just say, oh, it must be something that I can't, substantiate. When in reality, you should look at maybe what are the causes that are leading us to these outcomes. So looking at the root would be something that we could all agree on, because if you don't understand what the root of the problem is, then you will not get to a proper result. You're going to have crazy, insane things like what we're seeing in like Minnesota, where they're getting rid of all AP classes. They're trying to make sure that, in the name of equity, because they're literally just, it is racism. They're saying that black kids are not smart enough to be able to get good grades. This is insane. So this is why I'm passionate about it. That's why I'm here to talk to you. We're going to have a lot to say, but I just want to give you a quick thought experiment. There was a social experiment a while back where they took a few women, right? So we had 12 women. What they do is they prepare these women for the experiment. They told them that they're going to go in for a job interview. And before the job interview, right before, they pull them aside and they say, just before, we're going to put some scars on your face. So they use makeup to put scars all on their face. And then they let them look in the mirror. And the women are like, they're distraught, because now I've got to go and do a job interview, and I look terrible. My best assets are all taken away from me. So they go into the job interview, and right before they're going in, they say, well, let's just touch it up one more time. They touch it up, but whenever they're touching it up without them knowing it, they take all those scars off their face. So the women go through the interview, and they come out, and they're just telling you, oh man, I was discriminated on. It was terrible. It was horrible. The people, they kept staring at my face. I couldn't get a fair shake. And so the problem is that because they didn't have those scars on their face, they just had these brain barriers that were holding them back, and they were holding themselves back, and they were seeing discrimination where there was none. So the goal of CRT is to agitate for that divide. So that constant agitation, but instead what the Frankfurt School wanted, not to agitate for the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, the rich versus the poor, the typical Marxist mantra, if you will. Instead, what they wanted to do was divide that into many sections of the economy so they can put man against female, black against white, gays against straights. And so they saw a million ways that they could divide the society. And so that's what critical theories are. They're a constant critique of all that exists to agitate for the divide, to awaken critical consciousness. So that's a very important thing, because this is how you get people like Ali Hassan, I forget her name, but where she talks about she doesn't want any black faces that aren't black voices. I grew up black. I've been black my whole life. But for her, I don't have a legitimate black voice, because this is an ideological movement. They don't just want a black person to talk. What they want is you must agree with them. They want diversity of everything, diversity of race, sex, everything except for diversity of opinion. They don't want diversity of thought. They want to make sure that you're ideologically possessed. So it really is brainwashing. And I'll go into that. It's actually, it deep roots into cult-like thinking. It's Gnosticism. And it's really creepy whenever you talk to these people and you see what it is that they're calling racism. I'm sure you all heard about the college that got rid of a rock because they thought it was racist. I mean, it's just silly, the things that that we're dealing with. But unfortunately, we've got to have these debates, because there are some people that are being misled. So the communists, they call these people useful idiots, the dupes, right? So this is something that's been around for forever. It's not an insult. It's what they call you. So what we don't want to do is we don't want half the group, half the room to think that, oh man, we just want to teach accurate black history, and these other people are just racist and they're oppressing us and they just don't want the black kids to succeed. It's the complete opposite. Is that this is an ideology that teaches people to feel like a victim. It's intentionally made so they won't succeed. And I'll go over examples of what that looks like. One of their seminal works, there's this really crazy story about how a lady, she saw that the black dolls in Walmart were more expensive than the white dolls, and she thought it was racism. She didn't consider, that's where that God of the Gaps argument comes in. She didn't consider that maybe because there were less black dolls being built back then, maybe the black hair it cost more. Maybe the black ink, maybe it's because you had to run different marketing. There could be a million different things that before you get to racism. So this is what we're dealing with. And the goal behind this thing is literally just to make you feel oppressed until you can be so agitated that you'll be willing to be what they call you as the lumpen proletariat. So they want this thing that's called the urban spearhead. So their entire movement is to push communism. And they believe that the fight for communism is going to be bloody. And so they want to use black bodies. They do not care about black people. The people that, I'll go over the people that actually created this movement. They do not care about black people. They want to use black bodies to fight their battles. And then at the end of this thing, if you read their actual book where Lenin actually used for his revolution, this is a really important book. It's called The Revolutionary Catechism. They talk about killing the useful idiots after the revolution. These people are sick. And for them to try to use black people to foment a race war that they've been planning since back in the 40s and 50s. There's a lot of black communists that left the movement over what their goals were. So when you have people that tell you that, oh, no, it's just teaching black history. If that were the case, nobody would be in this room right now. So we'll hopefully have time to dive into each one of these things later, but I'll try and keep it short that way because I don't know how much time I have left. Thank you, guys. How time was that?
Thank you, Marcus. I am timing everyone, so when you hear your ding bell, now if I have to stand up on you, you need to slowly move to the left. Thank you again, Marcus. Next, we'll have Attorney Reverend Golden. You have the floor. You'll hear the timer go off if you go over. Please give him a round of applause as he comes forward.
Yeah, but let you go.
Good afternoon. I'm Reverend James T. Golden, Esquire. I pastor the Mount Zion African Methodist Episcopal Church of Fort Tampa. I'm the immediate past chair of the Manatee County School Board. I serve as a secretary of the Florida Council of Churches, and I'm one of the co-founders of Pastors for Florida Children. It's a nonprofit organization that is committed to trying to do what we can do to provide quality public education to everybody, every child. I want to thank Sister Bailey for extending an invitation to me to be a part of this afternoon. Thank you.
No, you can.
That's it.
You have the floor.
Just say what you gotta say.
I came because I would like to hear somebody's voice other than my own. And that comes in the context of questions that you may have. If my experience is of help in this moment, then I'm glad to have been invited. But I did not come to just expound to you what has taken 40 or 50 years to develop. Critical race theory cannot be summed up in 5 or 6 minutes. I'm not going to even try. But what I will try to do is to be open to hearing how critical race theory is being used. It is a theory. How we use it is where the problems come in. And so I want to hear how it's being used in public education. I want to hear how it's being used in the political system. I want to hear how people use it to advance other agendas other than what it was originally created for. When I graduated from Stetson University with my bachelor's of business administration, I applied to go to the Stetson University School of Law. And I was told I could not get into that school that year because they had their quota of Negro students. And I have lived long enough to now hear someone try to say intelligently that racism in reverse is a real thing. That is a misuse of knowledge. And as a man of faith, I subscribe to what is said in the Hebrew Bible. People perish not because of what they know, but they perish because of what they do not know. And moreover, because of what they will not allow someone else to tell them. Regardless of where the knowledge comes from, it helps. So I'm here to listen. I don't know whether that helps or not, but
You'll have your time. I do want to recognize that City Councilman Josh Kramer, Ward 3, came in. Thank you so much for attending. Please give him a round of applause for coming out. Next, we'll have Richard Tatum. Please give him a round of applause as he comes forward.
Friends, Americans, countrymen and women, please lend me your ears. I'm not so sure that's a great way to start off talking, because in Shakespeare's play about Julius Caesar, that's what he said at the beginning of his speech, and we all know what happened to him, right? But I'm here today, it's a real privilege to be in front of you to talk about an issue that is important to us. I do want to start my comments out today by saying that I'm here as a private citizen. Even though I am a school board member, I'm not representing the school board of Manatee County, and I am not here in any way, shape, or form to insinuate that critical race theory is prevalent within the Manatee County school system and that the teachers of Manatee County are doing that. Okay? That being said, there was an attempt about a year and a half ago, as Mr. Golden was talking about how critical race theory gets used, there was an attempt to put into the Manatee County school system a program based on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that was going to be the basis of teacher professional development as well as curriculum. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is actually what I will call the intellectual evil spawn, the poison intellectual spawn of critical race theory. Now, if you don't believe that there is a tie between critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and Marxism, let me give you the words from a lady named Carol Swain. Carol Swain is a retired Black female political scientist professor from the University of Vanderbilt. And let's hear her talk about the link between critical race theory, DEI, and Marxism.
And the greatest threat to American society today, I would argue, is coming from the diversity, equity, inclusion industry. It is steeped in critical race theory, which is Marxist. It divides people. And when they talk about anti-racism, they're really talking about teaching white people to hate themselves, especially the young ones. And when you think about what is taking place on college campuses and also now in K-12, children are being bullied, they're being shamed, teachers are being encouraged to teach nonsense, and it's fighting racism, it's helping racial and ethnic minorities. It's really harming everyone's child. Well,
Okay, so again, she's talking about the nation at large. She's not talking about the Manatee County school system. But again, there was that effort to insert diversity, equity, and inclusion as the basis for professional development of the teacher force, as well as other people, as well as the basis for the curriculum. Now, let me tie this all together for you from diversity, equity, and inclusion all the way back to Karl Marx. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, as we heard, is tied in with critical race theory and Marxism. If you look at Black Lives Matter, there's a lady named Patrisse Cullors. Patrisse Cullors was one of the original founders of Black Lives Matter. If you go to Patrisse Cullors' Instagram site, you will see that she follows Kimberly Crenshaw. Kimberly Crenshaw was one of the original founders and avowed communist of critical race theory. She was involved heavily and was a friend of a lady named Angela Davis. Angela Davis is still alive. Angela Davis was associated, maybe not a member, was associated with the Weather Underground. She was an avowed communist. You take her back one step and you go to a gentleman named Herbert Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse was an avowed communist. Angela Davis studied under Herbert Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse was a member of the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School was a group of avowed communist German Jewish philosophical thinkers who, as Marcus mentioned, actually fled to the United States of America in the 1930s to avoid persecution from the Nazis and came over here and inserted themselves into the higher levels of American academia and started spreading critical theory. Critical theory is the idea, as Marcus alluded to, but we'll go into a little deeper, is the idea that, you know what's going on here in the reason the proletariat hasn't risen up and overthrown the capitalist bourgeoisie is because they think their life is good because they're getting a better standard of living, they're getting health care, they're getting refrigerators, they're getting cars and all this type of stuff. But really the culture is keeping them down. So it's not economic oppression, it's cultural oppression. It's the political system, it's the moral system, it's the economic system. You go back from the Frankfurt School to a guy named Antonio Gramsci. He was an Italian communist writer. He was in Mussolini actually put him in prison. Hans Horkheimer, who was a member of the Frankfurt School, was a close associate of Antonio Gramsci, and he was the one that kind of came up with these ideas of cultural Marxism and passed them on to the Frankfurt School because Antonio Gramsci was very frustrated that the proletariat hadn't risen up yet, and he said, well, you know what, they don't realize they're being oppressed because their lives are getting better, but they're actually culturally oppressed. They're just not really, I guess, smart enough to see it. And then you go right back from Antonio Gramsci, who based his ideas and his writings on the original Communist Manifesto from Frederick Engels and Karl Marx. So there it is. You can tie it straight intellectually from DEI all the way back to Frederick Engels and Karl Marx. There's no doubt about it. DEI is an evil spawn of critical race theory, and that's one way that these ideas are being used out there to in our education system around the country. Again, maybe not so much in Manatee County, but luckily, thank God that we put a stop to that because it would have become the basis for professional development as well as the curriculum in the Manatee County school system. So I appreciate your time today. I know we have one more speaker yet to go, and I'll look forward to answering your questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tatum. Next, I'll have Dr. Sharon Jefferson. Please give her a round of applause as she comes forth.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey and Tiger Bay for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Good afternoon to everyone. So I'm really happy to be here as the only one that knows what goes on in a classroom and in a school building. I'm here to let you know today that CRT is a non-issue in K through 12 public education. The United States Constitution gives states the rights to create and govern schools. The Department of Education creates standards that they believe each child should learn and achieve. The DOE also takes on the responsibility of approving resources that support state standards. The DOE passes these standards down to school districts, then to their district level departments to create curriculum based on the standards. The standards and curriculum are passed down to the schools and then to the individual teachers. When teachers receive the standards and the curriculum, their primary job is to focus on how they will teach the standards and how they will support the students learning the standards. So let's talk about theories. There are 5 learning theories that teachers in K through 12 public education typically employ in their classrooms. These are the theories that they learned from their education programs, their education preparation programs, or through professional development workshops. 1, behaviorism is a view in which behavior can be explained by external factors, and behavioral conditioning can be used as a universal learning process. In behaviorism, the ideas of positive and negative reinforcement are effective tools of learning and behavior modification, as well as a punishment and reward system. 2, cognitivism is a learning theory developed by Jean Piaget, in which a child develops cognitive pathways in understanding and physical response to experiences. In this theory, students learn most effectively through reading, text, and lecture instruction. My favorite one is constructivism. It is the idea that people are responsible in creating their own understanding of the world and using what they know based on previous experiences in the process of linking new information to these experiences. People use these experiences and new information to construct their own meaning. Humanism focuses on the individual as the subject and asserts that learning is a natural process that helps a person reach self-actualization. Scenarios and role modeling are important factors in humanistic learning, as are experiences exploring and observing others. Connectivism is a relatively new learning theory, developing based upon the idea that people process information by forming connections. This theory has developed with the digital technology age, adapting to advances and in those arenas. This theory suggests that people are no longer stop learning after formal education and continue to gain knowledge from other avenues such as job skills, networking, experience, and access to information with new tools and technology. The application of these theories are used to support student learning. Educators who teach K through 12 public school students primarily have bachelor's and master's degrees that focus on K through 12 teaching and learning. There are some who have obtained specialist and doctorate degrees that are still used in the scope of K through 12 education with regards to teaching, learning, supervising, and management. CRT and parents' rights are not related concepts, as neither has any involvement with the other in K through 12 public school education. CRT may be taught to those pursuing higher education or doctorate degrees in usually law-related fields. So, for parents who are confused about your child's exposure to a term that has been misdefined and demonized, please rest assured that if your child is not pursuing a PhD, you do not have to worry about CRT.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists who have done their introductions. The first question is this. So we've heard several of our panelists speak about K through 12 and its CRT, which this is the biggest debate. On the national stage last night, it was said that Florida has banned the CRT out of the classroom, the critical race theory. So my question is, are we confusing critical race theory with actual Black American history?
Great. So,
Come to the.
oh, that one over there? Okay, sure.
He's, go ahead. You could go ahead because he says.
Okay, so this is great. So I wanted to make sure that we got to that talking point where they say that it's not being taught in the classroom. The NEA has already admitted that it's being taught in the classroom. They remember a year ago, about a year and a half ago, they said it is not being taught in the classroom anywhere in America. It's not being taught. It's not being taught. Now they they tune up a little bit. And now they say, well, it is being taught, but it's a good thing. It happens all the time. But I've got some quotes where I'm going to quote the NEA. It's all over America. I've got a bunch of examples of it being taught in the classroom. But another thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that you guys all understand that you've got CRT and you've got CRT in praxis. So praxis, all that means is it's a way of using so Paulo Freire, he's this really famous guy out of Brazil. He's a huge Marxist, very crazy person. So what he does is he has these things that are called generative themes, where what she was talking about constructualization and the self-actualization. So basically what they do is they use these generative themes where they would use something simple like, let's say, hey, classroom, when was the last time you all went to a theme park? And then maybe 12 kids raise their hand and somebody else doesn't. And they'll say, well, Jimmy, why is it that you haven't been to a theme park? Let's do some math or something like that, right? And they're going to pretend like this is part of the lecture. But really what they're doing is they're looking for a generative theme so that way they can bring in praxis. So they're going to use your lived experience and they're going to tell you why you're oppressed. So they're going to say, well, you haven't been because maybe you were just raised by a single mother. Well, oh man, that's really bad. Did you know that women make 12 cents on a dollar to a man and all these other things that have been disproven for forever now? So they're going to bring up some false information. If anybody didn't know that the gender wage gap was a myth, surprise. But we can go over that later if you want to. But we can. And so what happens is they use these generative themes to bring up anything that can have them bring in a political message and actually get your child to feel like they're a victim. They'll say, well, you got two moms and your moms, they're oppressed because of X, Y, Z. They'll do these things that are called, they're like oppression walks, basically, where you have every kid line up and then you'll say, we're going to have a race. And now if you're white, please take 2 steps forward. And if you have 2 parents in the household, please take 3 steps forward. And they're basically making these kids feel like, wow, I can never catch up to my white classmate. Oh, matter of fact, why do I even try? By the way, they actually went in, they did a study with this generative themes in Nigeria. The kids ended up rioting almost. They were screaming at the teachers. They didn't want to learn. They just gave up on life because what this does is it makes you feel like such a victim that there's no point in trying. Why try if I'm a black kid and you're telling me that I'm going to fail? I'm 20 steps behind the white kid up there. Why should I even try? And that's why we're going to go over some of the grades in some of these school districts where they are teaching CRT. Thankfully, it's not here, but where I lived at in San Francisco, it's definitely there. And we're going to go over what the NEA says. So we're going to make sure that there's no confusion if it's being taught in schools. So I don't want to ever hear that again, that it's not being taught in schools because, like he said, if you don't know better, it's ignorance is the lack of knowledge, right? So we don't want to violate the Bible. Let's try not to. Thank you.
Whoever wants to take that question, go ahead.
I, I scarce know where to begin.
Wherever you would like to.
Okay, I'm going to try. Since I've been listening, I have heard the conflation of about 80 years of history trying to be used to define a concept that has evolved. I think the earliest mention was from the Marxist Revolution in 1917. And we come forward all the way through the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. And we go further than that to 1993 when Derek Bell gave expression to the critical race theory with respect to the legal profession. And now we sit in 2023 in an hour, and we are expecting to come out of here with a common appreciation and understanding of what critical race theory is. First off, we now have so many subsets of critical race theory There's Asian critical race theory. There's Latin critical race theory. It's a theory. It's an approach. It's not even one of the five fundamental methodologies for teaching public education in Western civilization that Dr. Jefferson referred to. It's not even that. What we are is an evolving people, and we should not misuse our knowledge to amplify the ignorance of those who do not know what we know. We should not try to impress people with our credentials in an effort to convince them that what we are saying has any more veracity than anybody else. Nothing that has been said up here today by anybody is wrong. It is what you decide to use it for the good of this country. That's what makes it wrong. We all stood in this room a few moments ago and said, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. And we all know where that went in 1860, under God. And we may have people that don't even believe in the same God that I believe in, with liberty and justice for all. And the for all didn't even include me until 1865. And it didn't include women. And under Plessy v. Ferguson, it kept us separated based on the same race that we're talking about now. This idea of history in our midst evolves. Moore and his wife were assassinated in their beds on Christmas Eve, which was their wedding anniversary. That's a fact in Mims, Florida. Now that makes your white child feel bad when your black teacher tells them that that is a fact. That's not a problem of education. That's a problem of home training. You got to deal with that. And if your black child can't appreciate the fact that there is no black history without American history, and there is no American history without black history, then you got to deal with that at home. And if you can't do it at home, come to my place, 7401 Kissimmee Avenue, because that's where we teach values. And I'm going to end with this. You do not conflate critical race theory, which is a limited application of a theory with respect to one discipline, law, with the democratic values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's no conflation of that. And anybody that is trying to convince us that we're going to be more democratic when we try to return to less diversity is taking us back to where I ain't never going again. And anybody that is trying to convince you that everybody has been treated equitably in this country from day one isn't looking hard enough. And anybody that is trying to have us believe that inclusion is not an ideal to be pursued ain't in this room. Under Plessy v. Ferguson, we wouldn't even be able to be in this room together. I certainly, three of us wouldn't be up here. You see, the reality is that the idea of America and the democratic values continue to change. And either you change, what's this? Move, well, how does that thing go? I know y'all know it. Move, lead, or get out of the way. Because the reality is that you're going to do one or the other. Now, you can pretend to lead, but that doesn't mean that you ought not be asked to get out the way. And the reality is that many of us, we want to pretend to lead, but we want to lead people in the wrong direction. That's just not good. That's not good for our children. It's not good for our grandchildren. We just got to stop pretending that we know more than we know. All of us are on this same path, trying to do better and be better by each other. That's all. We got to stop trying to act like you know more than I know. There's only one thing worse, and I'm through with this. Only one thing worse than white supremacy. See, white supremacy is what you think
You can.
about me. I can't control that. But white superiority is what I'm here to tell you. I've never subscribed to, and I never will. Bottom line is, we all ought to be able to be judged on our own merit, on our own character, on our own self-worth. Now, I leave it to you to ask yourself, can you honestly say that that's been true in every aspect of your life? No. I know
We
you.
have
So-
Sharon and then
I
Richard.
Okay, I just wanted to resubmit that CRT is not, you will never see it in a lesson plan. You'll never see it on an anchor chart. You'll never see anything related to it on a teacher's board or whiteboard. And so what concerns me is folks who have never spent time in a classroom, have never taught a lesson, have never unpacked standards, can come and try to evoke this fear amongst our parents and our, the community about fears that are not even substantiated. And whenever there's pushback to say, prove it, they say, oh, well, it's not here. It's somewhere else. Because you cannot prove it. It's not an actual thing. And the reason why I'm really happy to be here, I want you all to think about the teachers, your children's teachers, if your grandparents or grandchildren's teachers, about at least once a month, we have to be in our classroom. We have to do an active assailant drill. And this is what really hits home to me all the time, is that when we have to run those drills, I look at these children, and you all think about K through 12, little bitty babies, up all the way up to 12th grade. We have to run these drills. And I think about the fact that you all and parents, if there was an assailant on the loose, you expect us to take care of your children. You expect us to get in front of that bullet. You expect us to protect them. And so the rhetoric and the just misinformation out there concerning what teachers are trying to do as far as misleading and harming children, I'm just asking everyone to just check that. Check it, and you do your own research, your own understanding, and ask yourself, what is happening at my school? What is happening with my child's teachers? All about communication. And so once again, I'm only here to be able to assure and to give some ease to our parents and our community that teachers, for the most part, nobody's perfect, has the best interest of your children. And that's all I want to say.
Richard. Go ahead, Richard.
So we heard Mr. Golden talk about the misuse of
I'm not
knowledge.
gonna let you do that. I'm Reverend Golden.
Okay, Reverend Golden.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
If you want to call me Colonel, that's fine then
No,
too.
I won't do that.
We're going to be
Colonel.
respectful.
Okay. But anyway,
We're going to be
so
respectful.
Reverend Golden talked about the misuse of knowledge. And if you look back at the history of evolution and Darwinism, you will see how that led directly to the idea of eugenics, and the eugenics being the idea that there are superior races. And so you can take a theory like evolution, which was just originally kind of a benign theory meant to show how maybe species evolved from lower level species to higher level species. And if you're not careful, you take that theory and you put it into praxis, as Marcus was saying, and you end up with some very evil things going on in society. You can see back in the early 20th century, there were actually 350 or so universities across the country that were teaching eugenics as college courses, high-level courses, right? This was a prevalent academic discipline, and it all evolved from this idea. It was evolution, which kind of evolved in what was called Darwinism, which evolved into social Darwinism, which involved in the ideas that there are superior races, and then eugenics was taught like that. So in much the same way, you have this idea, you say, well, CRT is just a legal theory. It's kind of benign. It doesn't cause us any problems. Well, I played you the clip from the professor, retired black female full professor of political science who wrote about these issues for over 20 years that they are linked together. And I can show you right here from the draft of the African American History Task Force back in the fall of or the spring of 2022 that it was absolutely alignment to diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. We were supposed to establish the District Diversity, Equity, District Diversity and Equity Committee, the DDEC. We needed to expand diversity and inclusion initiatives across the district for employees, develop, facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion training to become equipped to meet the needs of our student population. It was just going to be that diversity, equity, inclusion, which is tied to CRT and Marxism, was going to be the basis for professional development and curriculum development. They were going to do what was called decolonizing the curriculum. You can see that right in the draft plan. Let's see. Professional development will be provided. Professional development provided will support educators in their knowledge and content of pedagogical approaches and bias, with specific emphasis on decolonization of curriculum. Let me explain to you what decolonization of curriculum is. Again, these are the bad ideas that come out of CRT. Decolonization of curriculum is basically saying, you know, that whole British kind of empire colonization thing that happened that went around the world and brought, you know, Judeo-Christian values, free market economics, constitutional republic, an idea of God-given civil rights, the Enlightenment, which the scientific method, logical reasoning, even going back all the way to Greek and Roman philosophical and political theories, all that needs to be done away with. That was just the colonizers from Western Europe going out into the world and spreading that misinformation. And so now we need to decolonize the curriculum. And that is what was going to be done here in Manatee County, except for the fact that a number of citizens, and I included with the help of members of the school system, put a stop to that. And by the way, I'd also like to mention that I don't have 24 years of teaching in K through 12 school systems, but I have been a substitute teacher for about 2 years in the Sarasota County school systems. And I also was a college professor for 5 years. I have a master's degree from the French Political Science Institute, and I'm currently getting a PhD in the humanities with a focus on history and the ideas of political philosophy. So while it may be true what the doctor says that it's not being done in Manatee County, the reason that it's not being done is because we put up the walls and put a stop to it. Otherwise, it would be the basis of the curriculum of professional development today. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Tatum. Hold on a second, Marcus, please. If you have a question, would you please come to the microphone? If you have a question, start moving toward the microphone. Please ask the question and return back to your seat so they can answer. Please do not give me a speech at that microphone. I just need a question. And as respect that we have 4 panelists that want to answer questions. Please, if you want to ask a question, please move to the microphone.
My question is for Reverend Golden. Hopefully someone else will ask questions. A couple of years ago when you were on the school board and I saw in the newspaper that DEI was being considered for the curriculum, I spoke at a school board meeting talking about how DEI was part of critical race theory. I'm a retired national board certified teacher. I've been in the classroom for many, many years. I'm retired now, but it was in the schools. I spoke against it, and unfortunately, I need your question. I'm getting the question. I'm getting there, Octavia. I was verbally, I won't say assaulted, but I was told that I was speaking.
I need your question. This is not the time to, if you want to speak to him afterwards, all due respect, please ask the question. Whatever you need to ask, that's fine, but we have other people. I have a time.
I was not using dog whistles. Why did you do that?
You want to answer?
Why did I do what? Why did you do so? Was I the one that assaulted you?
Oh, yes, from the dais.
All right. I apologize.
Thank you.
Will you forgive me?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
But I work to elect Mr. Tatum.
Next question, please.
Prager U has recently been selected to be a resource for schools in the state of Florida. I reviewed some of the videos. My son is in the schools, so I reviewed some of them. There was videos there saying that women should stay home and do crafts. There was also videos saying that people benefited from slavery and that they should be thankful that they weren't killed. My question is how I, as a parent, can prevent my child in school to being indoctrinated with the stuff that the state of Florida is approving that don't align with my values.
Thank you. So number one, we've can I answer?
I'm sorry, my question was for either a teacher or somebody in the school
Why
board.
can't I answer?
Because they know the process of me as a parent being able to go to the
All right,
school
well,
to ensure.
I'm not.
But you
gonna
can answer
I'm
as
just
well.
going to comment on it. All right. So
Let's
number
keep
one, the part where that thing was, there was a whole uproar about is talking about teaching slave skills. That's just that's from academic research. Like that's not even debated. That's like Roll Jordan Roll, and I mean like these are the premier books. And keep in mind, this came verbatim from the AP Black Studies that Democrats said that they were upset was being pulled out of classrooms because it included queer theory. Why do we got to keep lying about things? Why do you got to keep trying to sneak things in? If it's just teaching Black history, nobody in this room rejects teaching accurate Black history. Accurate Black history is empowering. Black people have a proud history. We've done some amazing things. We are not talking about Black history, and it's very frustrating when you have people that are lying, honestly. And it's kind of infuriating to try and keep sneaking it in. Although the NEA has already admitted it, I can definitely give you a bunch of examples. And I didn't get a chance to answer that, but the exact point that you're talking about came from the AP's Black History Studies that was pulled out by DeSantis. So he literally just took it from that one and put it in. So the same one that Democrats wanted, that's where it came from verbatim. So it's insane that we have people that are now talking as if we just need to pretend like that did not happen. I could give you quotes where up to 25% of, you're not teaching that slavery was good just by teaching factual information. It's insane that we've got and it's 1 point out of 191 points, and it covers things like the Arabs' influence in it. Where the Africans, how did they influence the slave trade? What were the abolitionists saying in America? It's covering the entire gamut. To pretend like it's some pro-slavery curriculum is just insane.
Thank you, Marcus.
Is there anybody?
Go ahead, Reverend Golden.
Is there anybody else in here other than myself who testified before the Florida Board of Education about these history standards that
Mr. Davenport.
no,
Taylor.
Mr. Taylor.
I have 191 points. I have all 191. If you want to talk about the
We're real-
curriculum, I have it right here in front
I
of me.
need you guys to be respectful on the panel. Go ahead, Reverend Golden.
It's okay. See, that's precisely why these kinds of events are important. I want you to remember who had to be reminded to be respectful and polite. Don't let that get past you. The reason I asked is because I testified before the Florida Board of Education about the history standards that was presented by a working group that had been, and this is the truth, that had been established by government appointee, by the governor's appointees, and by the Commission of Education. They weren't even the historic group that is required by statute to develop these history standards. You haven't heard the last of this because you have people who are using and misusing their knowledge to keep the rest of us ignorant. And I'm not going to stand for that. I'm not going to allow you to come into a setting like this and make a representation about what the standards are when I know that we spent an hour and a half there objecting to the standards, including from people who were on that historic African American History Committee. And 15 seconds after the last comment was made, the Board of Education of the state of Florida took a vote and agreed to adopt these. That's not going to stand, at least without a fight. So we got to be careful here. And first off, we ain't even talking about critical race theory anymore. Now we see how we've weighed over it, how we moved over into talking about the historic standards. And that's because underneath a lot of what you're hearing is an agenda that has nothing to do with quality public education, but it has to do with the privatization of education in this state. That's what's happening. And that's why you have a school board like you have in many of the counties in the state of Florida, because our children are being dumbed down. How many of you even remember the Pythagorean theorem from the 7th grade? And I don't even want to ask how many of us ever used. I never used it in my life. I never went into a squared
plus b squared equals c squared.
Pythagorean theorem. How many of you have ever been anywhere?
Class.
How many of you have ever been anywhere where somebody said, I'm not going to say you that unless you know the Pythagorean theorem? What I'm saying to you is that knowledge, there is no good or bad in knowledge. Knowing is always better than not knowing. I'm not responsible for doing anything other than speaking the truth. You're responsible for using what I say and repeating it like I said it. Because if you change it, you've changed the truth. And the reality is, we've got one in 2 now, Gina, or 1 in 3 kids that get to the 3rd grade and can't read at the 3rd grade level. And we sitting up in here talking about whether we need to be more diverse, or whether we need to be more equitable, or whether we need to be more inclusive. Give me a break.
Yeah, we're saying that because you're pushing these ideological
Marcus.
messages on the students, that's why they're being dumbed down.
Marcus,
And
Marcus.
I can't
go-
respond to that?
But there was
but
a
I
question
gotta
from
let
Sharon.
everybody respond. Go ahead, Sharon.
There was a question.
And if you guys can, I know this is a part 2 coming, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you can respond in about 45 seconds, you guys
I
have
can.
3 more
'Cause
questions.
yes, I'm a parent. My kids graduated from Manatee County Schools. And I'm just letting you know that, yes, you can always opt out. Typically, teachers or schools would give you a syllabus, let you know what your child would be learning. And so, yes, you have the right as a parent. Years ago, when I taught 6th grade world history, and I had to teach about the Egyptian gods and goddesses. And there was a parent that wrote into me, said, I don't, because of our religious beliefs, I do not want my child learning about that. And it was no debate, because I believe parents, we're all in this together. It's a partnership. And so you have the opportunity to communicate with that school and that teacher for other options.
So, my turn. So that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about something where you can opt out. I think you should have to opt in, honestly. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is if she would have lied to the parent to their face and said that it's not being taught in school. And then when you got people that are saying that you've got these ideas and they've evolved, well, when the root of the core is bad, it doesn't matter that it evolved into 1,000 things. They're all based in evil. So what I wanted to talk about was the roots of it and what are the goals of it, but they kind of, dillied around the whole Marxist part. They kind of don't deny that it's rooted in Marxism, but they don't want to address that. Instead, they'll tell you that it's not being taught in school. If you're so proud of it, why not just let's have a debate on that rather than running around saying it's not there?
All right, I need to take the next question. I apologize. Mary?
Thank you, Mary Foreman. And I just want to ask either Dr. Jefferson or Reverend Golden, who were involved at the time that the school district was evaluating being part of the education task force, American History Task Force. This came down through the state. Department of Education has the Commissioner of Education's African American History Task Force, and Manatee County had a task force that considered adopting some of their standards. And I would just like for you all to clarify the activity of the district.
None of that.
You need a microphone.
I'm sorry. None of that was followed. The statute was put in place. The State Board of Education was asked to develop AP standards based upon the input from the African American History committees formed in each school district. None of that was in place. The gentleman who's a chair of the group that developed these standards that were finally approved is a professor out of Michigan. He's a chair of the working group that developed these standards. And the only opportunity that the public had to provide input into whether these were going to be adopted was when we went there and spoke before the Board of Education. And after about an hour and a half of people saying, no, they're incomplete, please take them back, please table them. After about an hour and a half of that, within 15 seconds of the discussion being closed, the Florida Board of Education voted to adopt them. And so now, where we are now is trying to help all of the parents and all of the children. And while I'm at it, I just need for you to understand the fact that we are resorting to teaching Black history, or that part of American history that was contributed to by Black people in our churches, is a sad commentary on the state of our community. Because it's not just Black children that suffer. All children suffer from the lack of knowledge. And that's where we are. We got to stop politicizing our thing and calling everything political. You just got to stop that.
Next question, please. Please ask the question.
Hi, my name is Jane Filestaker, and I'm a member. I wanted to just begin with a quick statement that I do have experience in education. I'm a former school board member. I held the seat that Reverend Golden and Mr. Tatum now holds. And I am also an experienced college professor with 22 years of teaching and now retired. And I was a writer of the Florida Sunshine State Standards. So I do have some background in this subject. And what I find disturbing is a complete conflation of critical race theory, DEI, and then Marxism. I want to know, Mr. Tatum, you went through a very quick series of recitations of authors that are unfamiliar to me. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me that we started out with puppy dogs and ended up with the Twin Towers. And the connections that were made were not clear to me. And if you could please show me something that in any way puts together these three things in a truly logical manner that apparently you believe, and I just don't see.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Can you do that in 30 seconds?
No, I can't.
Oh, goodness.
That's the.
I understand.
That's the. Yes, ma'am. I can do that. I'd be more than happy to meet you at a library. This is what I'm studying to some degree. I gave you all the intellectual partners, so to speak, all the way back from Black Lives Matter and DEI, all the way back to Marx. I can certainly show you different texts from the Frankfurt School, from Herbert Marcuse, from Angela Davis, from Kimberly Crenshaw. As a matter of fact, instead of me doing that, why don't you pick yourself up a copy of the book called Race Marxism, and it'll lay it all out for you. And that's probably 30 seconds. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Richard. Next question.
Do one line.
You can't answer in 30 seconds.
I just want to do one quote. So DEI, as by the people that created it, so this is a Public Administration Academy literature back in the 1960s. They described equity as an administered economy that it just shares such that citizens are made equal. So when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you are not culturally literate, if you're not brainwashed into their ideology, I used to be a Marxist. So if you are not a Marxist, you will hear that and you'll just think, oh, it's just diversity. It's just helping other Black people, helping people of different races. They're using what we call doublespeak. This is two different words. It's the same word, but it has two different meanings for two different people. If you're keyed in on it, it has a different meaning. So if we're just talking about Black, like all of this here, this is beautiful. This is not what diversity is. So that's why I wanted to have a more serious conversation. I didn't think that they would keep trying to run away from, it being taught, and then they say it's good, and then they say it's not being taught. But an administered economy, to make sure that shares are equal, they're describing socialism, communism. I can go back to Marx. I can go to the founding work.
May I ask my question?
Thank you, Marcus. One moment.
We just need more time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Because
Marcus.
I know our time is
Go
short.
ahead.
My question is for Mr. Tatum and for Reverend Golden, those two.
Okay.
regardless of what we call it, can each of you offer some recommendations regarding how within the school districts in Sarasota County and perhaps Manatee County could teach children the history of Black folks in this country and the history of the ideal of having equity for everyone? What would be your recommendation of how to teach that, regardless of what you call it?
Reverend Golden?
I am so glad that you finally asked that question, because that is one of the problems that we've raised, or at least I raised in several of the meetings with school boards over the 4 years that I was on the school board. We cannot expect 20th century educated educators to give us answers to problems that are only now appearing in the 21st century. When I was a kid, the biggest problem we had was that Albert Singleton, who was our drum major in the band, switched. But we all lived with that because I played clarinet and somebody else played drums. You just went with that. I don't even know what a transgender kid is. That's how much time has moved past me. So what we need to be trying to do is to upgrade the qualifications for teachers. Instead of demonizing our teachers and vilifying our teachers and trying to undermine our teachers, we need to be giving them the best resources, the best education, and the best pay that we can, and let them go teach. Because I'm telling you now, if my grandkid came to me and said, "Papa, explain to me the Pythagorean theorem," the best I could do is a squared plus
B squared equals C
C
squared.
squared. And they need more than that. So to answer your question, we didn't get into this overnight. This has been coming a long time. You see, when we were segregated, I couldn't go to law school. So I taught law in high school. I didn't have an opportunity to go to Juilliard. So I learned music right there under Mr. Hill. Now that we have desegregated and now that we have made progress, we need teachers that can educate everybody. And it does not help to have a teacher who doesn't know who Harry T. Moore is or Harriet Moore. It doesn't help if they don't know to say, "Well, don't worry about it. You're going to have to teach it anyway because it makes children feel bad." No, they do need to know that at one time in this country, some people went out to somebody's house on Christmas Eve and blew them up in their bed on their anniversary. They need to know that.
Thank
And
you.
we need teachers that have courage enough to teach that, and school boards that have courage enough to support that.
Thank you, Reverend Golden. We have one more question, and Richard Tatum has to answer this question. But to all of you who are still sitting here, I appreciate it. Manatee Tiger Bay appreciates it. This is a very important conversation, and thank you so much for your patience. Richard?
Unfortunately, it would probably be better that I not answer that question. And the reason for that is we're talking about, my ideas have to do with curriculum that might be used in the Manatee County school system. Those things will come up for a vote in front of the school system because there are 2 school board members in the audience. It would be better for me not to answer that question, ma'am, but I can answer it in private for you. Actually, there are 3 school board members in the audience, so it'd be better for me not to discuss upcoming things about curriculum that might be voted on at the Manatee County School Board. Thank you. Yeah.
I need to say, okay,
Yes, ma'am, but the law, as me as a school board member, applies wherever I am. Even though I'm here as a private citizen, the sunshine laws, unfortunately, and I'd like to get some modification because for this very reason, like we can't talk about these things, but the law says that no matter where I am, if there are other school board members present,
That's fine, Richard.
Yep, I got
Thank
it. I
you.
can't
Go ahead,
talk about
Sharon.
what I wanted to just make clear,
I'm sorry, we can talk about it privately.
because one parent talked about educational resourcing. Then someone asked about history. And I was hoping that Reverend Golden would give us the definition of critical race theory, as it was originally defined, so that, we can all also understand that critical race theory is not Black history. It's not a teaching of Black history. So whenever you hear Black, it's not critical race theory. Okay, so I just want to make sure that those things are, so you don't, those are not related. Black history, critical race theory are not related at all.
Can I get the next question?
Can I answer that one for Rachel?
Can we get
Yeah.
a definition?
Go ahead.
Can I read it? Critical race theory, as applied, is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that race is a social construct and that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. The basic tenets of critical race theory, or CRT, emerged out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Listen to this now. Created by legal scholars Derek Bell, wait for it, Kimberly Crenshaw. Now, y'all remember that name, you've heard that thrown about.
I would love to talk about our book in Charleston.
Kimberly Crenshaw and Richard Delgado, among others. A good example is when in the 1930s, after the rise of Marxism in 1917, government officials literally drew lines around areas deemed poor financial risk, often explicitly due to the racial composition of inhabitants. Banks subsequently refused to offer mortgages to Black people in those areas. That's the critical race theory that is applicable to us.
Yes.
Next question,
Oh, wait,
please.
can I?
One moment. I need to get the next question. Just please give me a second.
Well, my question is going to
Oh,
probably
so you
take a
guys
long
already know where
answer.
we're starting
So,
from.
Go ahead and
Okay.
ask the question.
so we
'cause I'm
have
running out of time.
CRT, which was kind of talking about oppressed and oppressor. That was the original thought behind it. Then we have DEI, which was to make everybody equal. Then it went into SEL, which is social emotional learning. Social emotional learning was to make everybody understand the feelings of each other. That's where I wanted to ask what the panel's own definition of social emotional learning is, because we've had it in the schools, but now it's changed into transformative, and what's being SEL taught today is different than I'm sure it was originally. So I kind of wanted to get a touch on what your definition of social emotional learning is today compared to what it was in the past. And the teacher, the doctor probably would be a good person to start with.
That is a very long question.
I know.
But that's okay. If you all can answer the question respectfully and get to the point and that she asked, so we can get to our last question, I appreciate it so much. Dr. Jefferson,
Okay, so
get your microphone. Thank you.
it is what you think it is. We're trying to oh, there you are. So it's just a strategy to be able to allow kids to, be able to accept one another. Is, we're always teaching social skills in schools for them to be respectful of other people, other kids. So it's, it never really took root, obviously, because it was one of those things that triggered the conversations regarding CRT. But that's basically all I can tell you, is that it's just it's a strategy that is used to just try to assist children to be able to get along better.
I thought it wasn't in the school.
Social emotional.
It's not, but it's still not CRT. She didn't ask me about it being used in schools. Is that correct? You wanted to know what I thought SEL was.
So,
Okay.
social emotional learning is an approach to teaching that builds on what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And it's been shown and proven that much of what children learn in the first 4 or 5 years of their lives is brought to school with them. And you have to include that in the way in which you teach them. That's why it's called social, emotional learning. Because if you use the 5 basic approaches to teaching that Dr. Jefferson talked about earlier, you know there's nothing in there that addresses the child, the child that comes to school. It addresses the 5 ways that that child will be met after getting to school. Social emotional learning says that before the child comes to school, there are some things that
They've already experienced.
that they're dealing with. And as a teacher, a good teacher, you have to encompass that in the way you teach and how you approach the teaching of that child. That's all. That's what it started as. That's what it still is. Now, if you're telling me, well, they're now using it to try to advance other aspects of a political agenda or other aspects of a social agenda, that may be true. I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. Did that answer your question?
Anyone else on the panel would like to respond to her question quickly?
So I just wanted to give 4 quotes, if I could.
4 quotes.
4 quotes. Okay. So number 1. So this was a communist that helped inspire what became critical race theory. So what he said was, "We must realize that our party's most powerful weapon is racial tension. By propounding into consciousness of the dark races that for centuries they have been oppressed by the whites, we can mold them to the program of the Communist Party. In America, we will aim for subtle victory while inflaming the Negro minority against the whites. We will endeavor to instill whites with guilt complex and exploitation by the Negroes." Quote number 2.
Marcus,
The revolution.
Marcus, do the second quote. I only have time for 2 quotes. Go ahead.
The revolution won't happen with guns. Rather, it will happen incrementally, year by year, generation by generation. We will gradually infiltrate their educational institutions and their political offices, transforming them slowly into Marxist entities as we move towards universal egalitarianism. That's Max Horkheimer. So that's one of the people from the Frankfurt School that created all critical theories. There is no critical theory that does not go back to the Institute of Marxism. So they're going to tell you there's other things. They're going to talk about Black history.
Thank you for your quote. Richard, did you want to answer Deanna's question?
Yeah. So if social emotional learning, what we mean by that is simply to make sure that as students grow up in the school system, we want them to be healthy in mind and have good morals and values. I'm all about that. It comes down to the way that you do something. So, but when social emotional learning moves into the area, for instance, I did a little bit of research on this, and there was one company, and they have a story that they want to use as social emotional learning for young children. And the story is of a girl with a lot of melanin in her skin who apparently has, her hair is what you might call maybe more African American hair, and she's trying to, her and her father are combing her hair, and she's trying to get the twist out of her hair or something, and then the story is supposed to be about how that shows that everybody's different and people have different types of hair and stuff like that. And I just think, I call that nonsense literature, okay? Now, what you could do, an alternative to that would be looking at something like Aesop's Fables. And one of the fables that's very quick and short that I looked up was the fact that there were a bunch of people that were sitting under a tree, and it was just a tree, and it was just sitting there, and it's not doing anything. And the people are like, "What is this tree here for? What are we doing with this tree? It's useless. It doesn't have any fruit. There's nothing good about this tree." And the tree speaks, and he says, "Yeah, but you don't realize you're sitting in the shade that I'm providing you." So if you want to teach the children an idea of gratefulness, social emotional learning, be grateful for the society you live in, your teachers, your school, and that kind of stuff, great, if that's what social emotional learning is. But if it's kind of that nonsense literature that I talked about before, that's the type of stuff that we don't need in our school systems.
Last question.
Last question. This is a question for all of you, the panel and the participants. Would you like a resource that has been recently created by both the League and the NAACP entitled Authentic History, a collaborative effort of authentic history resources? The task force was formed to support community efforts to teach the truth about the lived experiences of people of color in the United States. It's a 7 pages annotated bibliography. Our effort is to get this into the hands of as many people as can use it with your own children, your community groups, your churches, wherever you would like to have an annotated bibliography of 7 pages of resources. I'm going to leave cards where I've been sitting. You can email me and ask for a digital copy. Thank you.
Did you guys want to respond to that?
Sure, I'll take a copy of it. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it because of sunshine laws, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I'd definitely like to see your document, ma'am, if I could. Thank you.
Anyone else? I guess if you want a copy, whoo. Thank you so much to our speakers today. Thank you to thank you to the people who came out today for this very, very important conversation. Yes, this is one of those conversations that we can go on and on. Really quick before I end, if you are present, when you exit downstairs, anyone who is here today is invited to attend our production of Something Rotten at 8 p.m. Friday or Saturday night this week. Each person can receive 2 complimentary tickets from Manatee Performing Arts. You can get your tickets by stopping down at the office today as you exit. So if you're interested in going to see a show this weekend, Friday or Saturday, complimentary tickets on Manatee Performing Arts, you get 2 tickets. Date night. Clap. No. No, thank you so much again for coming. Please give a round of applause. Thank you, Reverend Golden, Dr. Sharon Jefferson, Richard Tatum, and Marcus Davenport. Thank you to everyone who attended our luncheon today. Thank you again to our gracious panel. Thank you for all your information. And remember, you may not always agree with someone, but it's always great to have a conversation. You may walk away maybe still not agreeing, but it's still great to have a great conversation. Thank you to my board members and everyone who helped out today. Our next meeting is September 28th, METV, AB7. Thank you so much. Have a great day.